Okay.
All right,
Ready.
all right. Okay, I will officially call to order the June meeting of the New Shore and Planning Board. First thing on the agenda is the Block Island Land Trust, Martha Ball and William Ball, Plat 3, Lot 118, Coordinac Road. Public hearing for an application for Unified Development Review for a minor subdivision of existing parcel into 2 lots, leaving 1 lot residential and 1 lot subject to conservation easements. Application for a variance from section 306C. I will make a motion to open the public hearing. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, motion carries. If you guys will turn on your speakers, and since you're the first one to talk, Joe, if you'll turn it on.
It's pretty,
Beautiful. Thank you. Go ahead.
this is actually, represents from the conservation point of view, the culmination of a long process that began in 1990. When the Balls granted the conservation easement over the northeast property, corner of the property, about 6 acres, to the Nature Conservancy. We filed, and I had, ready if you wanted, a copy of conservation easement that was filed in 1990. I think we have.
We've had copies of it, yes.
You mark that up. And then in 2001, well, granted another conservation easement over the northwest corner of the property, approximately a little over 5 acres, versus a little over 6. We have a copy of that, I think you already have it also. I'd like to mark that out as 2.
Mark, did you open the public hearing?
Yes, I did.
So you see that the plan of the subdivision is the called Ball Farm Minor Subdivision Conceptual Site Plan prepared by Atlas Land Survey. It showed in hatched in red and the left and the right of the conserved areas. It showed outlined in red a 130,000 square foot building envelope, which includes the house. And the house set back far enough from the boundary to satisfy all zoning setbacks. With that roughly 3 acre lot will be retained by the Balls. The entire remainder of the property, including the 2 sections subject to the conservation easement and the approximately 9 undeveloped acres in the middle, will be conveyed to the Block Island Land Trust. So what we have here essentially is a 2 lot subdivision, a 3 acre lot to be retained by the Balls, and the entire remainder of the property, approximately 20 acres, to be created as a second lot, which is under contract with the Block Island Land Trust. And will close once the subdivision is approved. I'd like to mark that map that's applicant's split. And we've also filed with you water test results approved by the state of Rhode Island, showing that the separately created 20 acre lot is buildable. The existing lot has the existing work approved septic system already on. And then we have those water table tests marked applicants for.
That's okay.
And finally, you got the wetlands on the property analyzed, and the state of Rhode Island has issued their letter basically agreeing with the state layout of the property, which show where the wells are located, and that there are in fact substantial buildable areas not affected by the wetlands. That letter dated April 19, 2024, addressed to Martha Jane Ball. I'd like to mark that applicant's 5. You asked for and received a waiver from 100-foot lot requirement. You also asked a waiver received from the requirement to build the road. So the plan will be that the existing driveway will continue. There's a right of way shown that provides access. Hopefully move the wetlands for the conservation, and we don't propose to build that. We might build that someday. We need to have the right to build. So essentially, the subdivision requires no additional construction, and it's ready to go as is, if it's okay with you guys.
All right, thank you. Questions from the group? No? Okay. No, right? Questions from the audience?
I should say, Mark is here, you probably noticed.
We did notice that, thank you. Sure.
I have a quick question. May have missed this in the reading material, but will the undeveloped area have developable potential in the 3 acres section, or will the 3 acres be like any other development?
Once you approve it, the 3 acre lot is a lot, just like any other 3 acre lot in the universe.
Okay, you don't add development rights to that.
The block out land trust will be owning the entire fee, so that the balls will only be retaining that 3 acre piece.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Mhm.
And when, after the audience speaks, I'm gonna ask Michelle. if we do it.
Yeah, I'm waiting to see if there's any other comments. No, okay. All right, and nothing else from the board? All right, Peter, anything from you?
Not at the moment. I had a hard time Sorry, I'm trying to turn on my video. I had a hard time understanding the speaker. I don't know if it's a microphone issue.
Yeah, you have to eat the microphone. That's what we say in sea
I
level.
try to keep it a little distance.
It wasn't on.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought it was on.
That's all right.
It's a quick summary. We're creating 2 lots. One is a 3 acre lot retained by the balls, buildable. The other is a 20 acre lot with 2 conservation easements already existing on it to the Nature Conservancy to be acquired by the Block Island Land Trust. And we're asking that no roads be created, that the existing driveway continue to provide as access to the Balls property. And we have across the Balls property a right of way which will allow access to the rear of the conservation land, but we don't propose to build it.
That sounds like the application that I saw and prepared a report on. Thank you.
Okay, Michelle, have you any comments or questions?
Yeah, so this is a 2-stage procedure. The first thing that we need to do is a public hearing on the variance request. The variance is requesting that the proposed lot, the ball lot, the 3 acre lot, will have no frontage where 200 feet is required. And then this board needs to take needs to conditionally approve or deny that request for the variance under the variance standards. If you look at Peter's report, he has made some recommendations regarding those findings on the variance standards. And then after that has been conditionally approved or denied, that is when you will then consider the subdivision proposal in front of you. And those have the standard required findings that you guys are familiar with under Rhode Island General Law 452360. One of the things that I did note that hadn't really been addressed in the application was that there needs to be a determination made that the creation of the lot lines, which are around the existing structures, like the ball property, the 3 acre parcel, will not make those structures that are conforming currently non-conforming.
Shows that the closest that any of them is set to the border is 76 feet, and the setback in that zone is 50 feet. So there's no setback issues, and the dwellings themselves are very small, nowhere near. You're not by shrinking the lot to 3% coming anywhere near, or even 1% lot coverage. Never mind 3.
Right, so there was setbacks which are noted on the north and east of the plan, but there's no setback noted to the existing residence. And there's no actual computation of the max lot coverage, though I would agree with the applicant that it appears from the scope of the plan that there's likely no issue there. We just don't have the hard numbers. So perhaps that's something that any approval could that the final that the approval would be conditioned that the final plan application have those numbers in support to confirm what the applicant has stated in their narrative that it meets all the zoning criteria in terms of lot size, setbacks, and density.
That's easy. We can do that.
The only other thing is that they're going to be transferring that the property by deed to the Block Island Land Trust. And there's going to be a driveway, so they're going to need to retain an easement over that driveway in order to have that access to the property, which would be absolutely necessary, especially if this board does grant the variance on the frontage. They're going to need access from the street to the property. And the subdivision checklist requires proposed deed restrictions. And we just don't have any draft easement showing that the driveway will be reserved for the Ball property in perpetuity. So again, this is something that you can condition your approval on if you want to, so that the final application has that addressed when at its conclusion.
Again, that's not a problem for us, and we will not only reserve the driveway for the Ball property, but once the driveway gets to the Ball property and then veers off, we'll reserve that for the land trust adjacent to the other lot.
Michelle, because this is a minor subdivision, the applicant needs to apply for final, which would just be administrative, so there's still another step after the close of this public hearing where they could submit the list of items.
And if your approval basically sets those as conditions, we can satisfy all those administratively in the final filing. It's not a problem.
Margie, after you reach a consensus on this application and address the standards for the variance and the subdivision, you could make a final decision or a written decision next month if you decide to.
Okay.
And frankly, we rather expected that you would, since it's a complicated matter.
I thought we'd get through the hearing and then make the findings and then write it up.
Yeah.
If come back next month. Like, we're all on the same page on that. Okay. So any further questions or comments before I close the public hearing? Michelle, anything else, or is that,
There's a hand up.
okay?
No, so your next step will be to whether or not, well, first, did we ask if there was any public comment for the public hearing?
Yeah, we've done that.
Okay, then you need to decide whether you're going to conditionally approve or deny the request for the variance and
Right.
have a consideration of the variance standards.
Okay, we'll do that. Good, go ahead.
And to respond to your question, Michelle, my name's Jory Andrews. I'm here on behalf of Martha Ball. The purchase and sale contract for the property to sell to the Block Island Land Trust does call for the reservation of those access easements. So all we have to do is add a note to the plan, as Joe Priestley indicated we would.
Good, thank you. Last chance, anybody else with comments, questions? Sure. Yeah, that's good. Got the cord. Is that better? Okay. Then I make a motion that the hearing be closed.
Second.
Social seconds. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, motion carries. And I will make a motion to grant a dimensional variance.
Consensus and then.
You want to do a consensus first, not an actual motion?
Yeah, you're gonna do, reach a consensus, address any variance standards, subdivision standards that you would like included in the draft motion for next month.
Okay,
And then we will prepare the motion for you to
That-
vote
all
on
right.
next month.
Fine. Okay, I have no questions about the approving the dimensional variance. Sosha? Okay,
If you're looking for a list of the standards on Peter's report, page 3,
okay,
sorry.
let's take a look at page 3.
it lists out the standards and his recommended findings of each standard.
And if it's easier, Michelle might be okay with you just adopting them as listed.
Okay, you mean on page 2, I think is what we were saying. Is that correct?
It's the
I
table.
believe it starts at the top of bottom of page 2 and then it goes on to page 3.
Okay. So the subject property contains existing preserved conservation
Nope,
land.
the next page,
Okay, next
the
page.
table. Yeah.
All right. Hardships for the applicant seek relief due to unique characteristics of the subject land or structure and not to the general characteristics of the surrounding area. And it's not due to a physical or economic disability of the applicant. That's what you're talking about?
Yes,
Okay,
that is a standard that this board has to find in order to approve the variance.
okay,
So you have to find it as a matter of fact. You guys are the fact finders. You make the final determination. So you consider the evidence in front of you and you determine whether or not they've met the requirement of this finding. And again, Peter has made suggested findings for you. So you can choose to adopt those if they match your own fact finding, or you can clarify on the record what facts you do find that meet this standard.
okay. I will, I agree with Peter's listing of the fact findings for these on page 3 and continuing, I guess it's just on page 3. Anybody have any other questions?
No, I read those.
Okay, everyone agrees? Okay, so the consensus is that we agree with the facts, finding that Peter has listed for us.
Great.
All
And now you
right.
can go down to the next factor, which is D2 there.
Yeah, we D1, D2, and D3. And D4. No relief
Yes.
is needed, so that's fine.
Well, all of those factors have to be found in order to grant the dimensional variance. So
Okay,
this
you want me
board
to-
has to indicate whether they adopt the facts for all of those different factors.
I think the board just said yes. You want me to read them?
Just to clarify, the factors that we're looking at are listed D1, D2, D3, D4, E1, and E2 on page 3 of the review that was done by Libra Ball
Yes.
on this plan, which lists the factors and proposed factual findings, correct?
Okay. I agree with those.
Yes.
Okay, the board, all the members of the board agree with the D1, D2, D3, D4, E1, and E2.
Okay, so is the board looking to adopt those as
Yeah,
its
both
factual
would be happy
findings?
to adopt these, yes. Now, do I need a motion for that?
No, because you're not making a motion to approve
Okay,
You're just
All right, the
reviewing
consensus
the
is that
standards.
we agree with the standards.
Yes,
Okay,
so that
Okay.
we can prepare a motion for the July meeting, so you can vote on a.
Well, you have to conditionally approve or deny now before considering the, at public hearing, before considering the subdivision.
So you are conditionally approving.
we're
and then-
conditionally
Yes.
approving the dimensional variance from section 306C.
Right.
So yeah, you can vote on.
All right, I make a
Go
motion.
ahead and vote on the variance.
Okay, I make a motion to grant a dimensional variance for section 306C from the zoning ordinance from 200 feet to none.
Second.
Okay? Any further comments or questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, motion carries. All right, anything else we have to do with this? Or-
So now the next consideration would be the actual subdivision itself. And
Okay.
that's the findings under 452360. If you look at Peter's report, Those findings would start on page 4. Again, you had suggested that you might be deferring a final decision on this issue until the next meeting. I don't know if you want to have any discussions or votes on any of those factors at this time.
I think I'll take a consensus of the board. For the standards of review, do we agree with these? And I think the answer is yes.
Yes.
Okay, the consensus of the board is that we agree with the list that Peter has submitted on page 4 and on page 5. Okay,
Even 6.
and page 6. Oh. Now, do I need a motion for that or is that next?
No,
month?
because you're gonna
That
vote on it next month.
Okay, fine.
Yes.
So the consensus is with the fact and findings we agree with. And
Just so we have some direction
direction.
to prepare the
Exactly.
motion for you to vote on. next
Okay,
month.
good.
Does that include the right of way that Joe mentioned that they'll provide?
Yes, so that's in the notes.
Yeah,
The
so we
right
need
of
that.
way, the deed,
And the number to confirm the lot size, you mentioned that
yep,
too.
dimensional standards.
Okay, and the
which-
roadway.
Yeah, I've
Okay.
already verified that.
Got
one.
both of those. All right, then I think we finished with this, unless there's something else I missed. We're still getting used to this new process.
Yeah, so are we.
We're all in it together. Thank you very much. We'll
Thank
see
you.
next
What
month.
a remarkable
Thank you.
reservation opportunity. Since 1990. 35
Okay.
years, 34 years we've been preserving that.
All right. Section 513, accessory dwelling units, section D, accelerated dressing used by special use permit. 3, expedited approval process. Discuss and act on a planning board pre-approved building plans. Do you have something to go for this, Jen?
No, I put it on the agenda just to keep it
Alive.
alive and to let you know that we haven't overlooked it. We are going to meet, Gail and Claire and I are going to meet and discuss it, but we were trying to work through the amendments first and then we'll circle back to that one. So,
Okay, fine. So we'll keep that on the agenda for whenever you have
Yeah.
something for us to look at. Great. Number 3, zoning ordinance amendment. Define uses in the list of prohibited uses that the ordinance does not offer a definition of. Review draft amendments and make recommendations to the town council, including a finding of consistency with the comprehensive plan. Okay. Michelle, we are going to approve the list of definitions. Have you anything else you want to discuss with us or talk about what we might possibly want to look at? I know we just had a small change, nothing major.
Yeah, I think that you may have voted on this, but just to make sure the change that you wanted was made, which took out propane as that was literally the only change that was made from the last time this was in front of you and you had indicated that you were going to approve it.
I have.
Okay. All right, before I make a motion, are there any questions or comments?
I have
Sosha?
2. Just curious, Michelle, item number 31 on the first page, aircraft, does that include drones?
Okay, so the most, oh, I'm not seeing 31 on the first page. 10.1.
10.1.
Okay, 10.1. Oh, I see it. Line 31.
Yeah,
I think it would, the way that the definition is crafted now, I believe it would, encompass drones. It's, the definition is any contrivance now known or hereafter invented for use or designed for navigation or flight in the air. So a drone is, used for navigation or flight in the air. It's a device, so it would fall under that definition. So if
Okay,
you,
so are these prohibited in all zones now then? Does
No,
that,
these are just definitions.
right, but
These are just definitions. They're not actual either for or
Um,
against anything.
They're not pro-
Okay.
Bear with me just one moment and I can confirm whether or not aircraft is a prohibited use.
I did the same thing.
Mhm.
Number 27, Michelle. Section 111A, 27.
So what is prohibited is the landing and takeoff of aircraft, aircraft landing on runways, strips or pads, including heliports or helipads, except at the state airport in emergency situations. So what's being defined is what a aircraft is. But what is prohibited is only the landing and takeoff of that aircraft. So, I mean, in theory, since what's being prohibited is landing and takeoff, it might prohibit drones.
And just to add on to that, and please, Jen or Michelle, correct me if I'm wrong, but a zoning ordinance is enforced against a property owner. So on public land, it'd be not enforced against the drone operator, but public or private land. It's not the drone operator, it's the owner of the land.
Wow.
I don't understand.
Yeah, maybe go through that again with us.
Yeah, zoning, so
Like
if a zoning, like a notice of violation goes out for anything, it goes to the property owner. It may also go to, say, a business owner or something, but it's always the property owner. So public land could be owned by the town or.
So this isn't part of the definition, this is just.
Right, but if you're flying a drone on a state
Make sure
beach,
your microphone is on. Thank you.
I'm just confused as to where this is going. If that's gonna be put in as part of the definition, or this is just,
So you
I'm
already have
clarifying the
this
use
as
of a
a
drone.
prohibited use. So you already have this as a prohibited use. This is already in your ordinance. It's already prohibited for aircraft to take off and land in New Shoreham. So anybody who allows any aircraft to take off or land on their property would be in violation of the zoning ordinance, as the ordinance currently states. The only question is, what is an aircraft? And whether or not a drone is encompassed in the definition of aircraft. And the definition that we have drafted in the proposed ordinance amendment would encompass a drone. So one of the things that you could do if you did not want to encompass a drone, you could exclude that from the definition of an aircraft.
I think before we take that next step, I just need a better definition or time to look at where drones are currently, where the aircraft are prohibited. If they're currently prohibited in all zones, I suggest we take drones out.
It is prohibited in all zones. That is what 111 is. It's prohibited all across New Shoreham.
Then how come the fire department can use them?
Because it says except at the state airport in an emergency situation. So that would be emergency
Oh,
situation.
all right. Okay, enough of that one. 191.1 underground storage. For us, it's page 5, item 1. But it starts on page 4, line 38. The language is unclear. At the end of the sentence, it says is equal to or greater than 10% beneath the surface of the ground. But it doesn't say 10% of what?
I would assume it would be 10% of the storage, but if you want to put clarifying language in, just let me know what you would like as clarifying language.
No, but I don't understand what it's saying because it doesn't explain what the 10% is of.
So it's referring back to any one of a combination of tanks, including underground pipes, which contain that, which is greater than 10% beneath the surface of the tank. So it's referring back to those tents in the first part of that definition, line 36. But again, this is not, these are not terms of art, so if you would feel more comfortable with an alternate definition, I'm happy to make whatever changes you feel would clarify.
No, I can't make a recommendation because I don't understand what you're trying to get at to begin with, so I can't do that. What is being measured at, what's being measured when you mention 10%? 10% linear distance below the surface of the ground, or?
So imagine any sort of tank that you have. If you dig a small hole and put it in that hole, but so the whole thing isn't under the ground, but part of
Yeah.
it is under the ground. If
Yeah.
the part that's under the ground is more than 10%, then it constitutes underground storage. That's what this is saying.
Oh, now I know what you're getting at. Okay, I didn't get that. I don't
So
know
it's-
how to.
No, I think that was a good question, Sosha, because
Yeah,
I didn't completely understand it and I was the one having to
I don't know how
enforce
to
it,
correct
so I'm
it.
glad you asked.
Social needs to be changed. I don't know how to change it.
The idea is, are we only going to call it underground storage if the entire thing is under the ground? How much under the ground does it need to be to constitute underground storage?
So maybe the word that's missing is 10% of the container is beneath the ground. I think that's what you're trying to say, right?
Yeah, we could add that language in.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay, all right, I
Yeah,
figured
if
it
you have
out.
questions, anyone reading the ordinance is gonna have a question. Thank you. So this is stating, just to clarify, that if a propane tank is underground, it's prohibited if the whole entire tank is underground?
No,
There's a percentage that has to be above ground? I'm sorry.
No, if the whole thing is underground, then it's clearly, then it goes underground storage. Whether or not it's prohibited would go back to, again, 111. And what is prohibited, I know that 111 prohibits some underground storage. I think that actually that's part of the 25, which is on page 1, starting at line 22. So the underground storage of petroleum products, diesel fuel, gasoline is prohibited. So what does that mean? What is underground storage of gasoline? If you have a tank and that tank is not fully underground, but partially underground, does that constitute underground storage? That's sort of the question that's left open without a definition here. So the idea is that this definition would answer that question. How much of that tank that holds the gasoline needs to be under the ground for it to constitute underground storage, which is prohibited.
Right.
And so this is indicating it's equal to or greater than 10% of that tank. That's what we're
Right.
clarifying.
Right.
So propane
If
tanks
10%
will be allowed to
or
be
more of
underground.
that tank is under the ground, then it would be underground storage.
Okay, thank you for your time. I had to clarify that too.
Mhm.
I just had one question about
Go
the
ahead.
floating residence and houseboat. Both lines say floating residence is not a houseboat and a houseboat is not a floating residence, but the definitions are so close. What is the difference other than the word building?
Yeah.
I'm not sure I understand the differences, and because we do have quite a few residents living on a boat in the harbor, they don't have buildings on them.
No, a houseboat can be self-propelled.
Yeah, and what I understood, I had the same question. A floating residence is in a fixed location. It
But-
says here at the end means by some means to a fixed structure.
And
But-
that could be an anchor, and how affixed is that? Is that considered
It,
affixed?
yeah, I don't know. I mean, I was saying, unlike a houseboat, a floating home is in a fixed location. Is that right? Is that how they differ?
And it is not self-propelled.
Correct. I think a houseboat can move and a floating residence can't. It just floats.
Right.
Move it.
Do we want to
Houseboats are.
add that to 72.2 floating residence?
Yeah.
Well,
Or is that
what
is
it
that
does
clear
say
enough
is
that
it's
it's
not self-propelled. So it means it doesn't move. So you can't move it.
Mm-hmm.
Unlike a boat, which is self-propelled and you can move it. I know that the floating residence and houseboat definitions were arrived, with feedback from the, harbor master, I believe. Peter, do you remember?
Starting to remember what?
The definitions of floating business, floating residence, and houseboat. We coordinated, I believe, with a harbor master or
So
Someone-
the town,
Already?
yeah, the interim town manager, her husband is the harbor master for Newport. So she's very familiar with this. It's a statewide issue. And so that was the recommended language. I believe there might be some state task force working on this.
I just wonder if go ahead, Gail.
I think my question is the mission so that with defining a floating residence to not allow residency in the harbor on a boat?
No.
Yes,
No,
currently,
that's
if
the
you look
definition.
at line 15 of page 1, number 4, under general prohibitions, floating residences or businesses are already prohibited. What we're adding here in this ordinance amendment is to also prohibit houseboats. So to sort of and the idea is you can't get around the current prohibition that exists of floating residence by saying, well, it's not a floating residence, it's a houseboat. So we're including that in the prohibitions and defining all 3 items, but that is a floating residence is currently prohibited in the town of New Shoreham. The question is whether a houseboat is or is not prohibited and whether or not a houseboat would be a floating residence. The idea of these amendments would be to clarify those issues.
So the definition for houseboat, to avoid an issue with what we currently have going on in the harbors, the defining word is building constructed on it?
I would think so.
Yeah, in that it can be self-propelled. That a floating residence is typically unlike houseboats, a floating home or residence typically stays in a fixed location because it's not self-propelled. That's how I read that. And then
Me too.
in 95.1, the houseboat can be moved.
Right, and
But
then
it's not saying that it can't be
But
inhabited.
that's what I mean,
It's not-
but because most boats don't have a building on it, a boat in the harbor that is lived on is not going to be perceived as a houseboat, I take it. I'm just trying to
That
clarify
is
this so that there
correct.
isn't an issue down the road
Yeah.
with people who are living on their boat for the summer.
Suddenly can't.
Yes,
And
it
all of
definitely.
a sudden they're under a definition of a houseboat.
Also, the second part of that
Seems
definition
more
is
like
that
a
the
floating
use-
residence to me, but I didn't know there were actual definitions in a harbors committee for.
What we don't
these.
want to do is prohibit people from living on the boats in the summertime, because that has been a way of many people being able to be out here for the summer because they do not have housing.
Right, and
So we don't want to get rid of that.
right, so this definition of houseboats, boat, as I read it, sorry that I can't read and I can't speak, sorry. The houseboat, to me, it sounds like in this definition is very different than living on your boat. Your
Right,
boat
I agree.
is a boat. A houseboat is, by this definition, a building constructed on a raft or a barge or a hull. Whereas people who are living on their boats in the summer in the harbor are in fact living on their boats. They're not living on a houseboat. They're not in a floating residence because a floating residence can't propel itself. A houseboat is a structure on top of a boat, like you're saying, a building, right? On top of we're used to them
Yeah.
being on a barge rather than a boat. So I don't think, am I wrong, Michelle? Is this if
That's how I
I'm living on my boat in the harbor, I can still do that?
Yeah, you're
Because
you're absolutely right. The other part of that definition is that the use for transportation or recreation is secondary. So its
Hmm.
primary purpose is residential, so that would not preclude people from living on their boats. It has nothing to do about residency on a boat. It has to do with the nature of the structure, which is, as you said, a building constructed on that raft, barge, or hull.
My guess is that the issue was that folks are putting a little like 6 horsepower outboard on a back of a houseboat and calling it not a floating residence. So this would close that loophole.
Yeah, makes
Okay.
sense.
Thank you.
Mhm. Okay, other questions?
I have a question about,
Okay,
if I may,
Mary? go
Michelle,
ahead.
on page 4, 189 toxic or hazardous materials. The last sentence includes herbicides. Is that general enough to include name brand herbicide? For example, Roundup is an herbicide. That would be included in the definition of an herbicide.
Um,
A
it would
glyphosate-based
only,
thing.
it would only be if it also poses a significant actual or potential hazard to those listed items. So you can have a herbicide if it doesn't pose a significant actual or potential hazard. So you can have any of these items as long as they don't pose a significant actual or potential hazard. So that's basically that's a framework that you're working within. So then depends on the actual circumstance of what the herbicide is, and if somebody is complaining that Roundup or whatever is causing some sort of hazard, then it might be prohibited as a toxic material, but they'd have to show why that's a significant actual or potential hazard when you can buy it on the shelf and everybody can get it.
So far, yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I'd like to get rid of that.
Anything else?
Okay, no more.
Now, do you want to see a corrected copy of this next month and then vote on it? Or we could assume that they will make the corrections so we can go ahead and approve it
I
today?
feel safe assuming.
Yeah, I just had one more quick question.
Oh, sure.
On 110.1 for livestock, why are bees excluded? Because they're just not by definition, like bovine, equine. 11, on page 4 at the top, 110.1 under livestock, the definition of livestock. Just curious why bees weren't included, excluding bees.
Because a lot
of people have
bees. No, I'm not being.
Or no, I don't know. I
Yeah.
just, bees just really aren't livestock, right?
Well, also, I believe, I'm looking for it right now, but I believe that livestock is prohibited in New Shoreham.
No, it's not. Joe's cows are not
We have
prohibited.
cows.
We have cows that are used for.
Yeah, we have several farms that have
And
cows,
horses.
horses.
Mhm.
I think maybe in residential areas, I'm trying to find the reference.
They,
to
they
it.
are, they're
They
in
are
residential.
areas.
They just fall under, farming and,
Okay,
so we want to make sure we're
okay,
not
so. it's
prohibiting
You
that.
under-
don't want to prohibit, I mean, a lot of people have chickens, as I said. Remember, we were a farming community for many, many, many years. That's part of our heritage.
It's under number 23 of 111, which prohibits the parking or use of trailers. And it exempts the use of trailers from this prohibition when it's used for livestock or other agricultural purposes. That means if you're using a livestock trailer like a horse trailer, it's not prohibited. So the definition of livestock would be as used here, is telling you what's allowed to be used in a trailer. So to exclude bees would mean that I guess you couldn't bring bees around in a trailer. We could take out the exclusion for bees. I think that was a general definition of livestock that we pulled from
Yeah.
other ordinances.
Yeah.
Probably because, again, there's usually some restrictions to what livestock can be kept. And a lot of times you want to exclude bees from that type of consideration. But in this type of consideration where it's the trailering of the livestock being allowed rather than prohibited, maybe you want to take the bees out. That's up to you.
But Putting bees in a trailer might be uniquely hazardous as well.
But they do.
They do,
ship
that's how
them in
that's how they
But
transport
they
them.
do
In the
transport
hives,
They transport the hives.
the whole box.
The whole box
boxes
goes onto
too,
it,
from property to property.
And we do have one beekeeper here, or at least
Two.
that I know of
Hmm.
on the island, that does lectures and does move her
Take it out.
one or two boxes as a show and tell type thing. And I do not want to get rid of that. That's a great.
And she does it in a
great
trailer, not in like a pickup bed.
It could be.
I mean, she has a pickup bed right now, but it could be at
It's
one
possible.
point she would need a trailer. I just don't want to limit.
I just don't
Yeah.
want to limit.
Yeah.
Yeah, take out the bees.
I
So-
think the easiest way to handle that is just to remove that phrase, but excluding bees.
Or what I could do is instead of but excluding, just put and bees to make sure that bees are allowed. What I would ask is if you did want me to address that with the bees, just to give us the opportunity to cross-reference the other ordinances to see if that definition of livestock, if it would create some sort of contradiction in other parts of the ordinance, not necessarily the zoning ordinance, but the town ordinances.
Okay,
Yeah, I think that's good.
Yeah.
all right.
I would change the word livestock, period, because we also transport clams.
Oysters.
I meant oysters. Thank you. The other clam.
So that could be up in, we could change number 23. So- which is already part of this here. Right now, we're only changing. We're allowing the transport of trailers to transport boats in 23B, page 1, line 21. So if you wanted to allow as an additional exemption to the prohibition, the transport of trailers of oysters or other sea creatures,
Shellfish.
Other shellfish, right.
we could draft that in as a new subpart to that that exclude the exemption from the prohibition.
That's fine.
Okay.
You want to see this one more time? before-
Yeah, I think I want to see this one more time. We brought up a sufficient number of issues that I think maybe we might want to look at this again in July. Make sure it all gets added in and that we don't think of anything else over the next several weeks.
I thought of one thing, if I could just. make
Before we
one-
forget it, quickly, go
Yeah.
ahead.
I know we're really, we've talked about this multiple times and I was almost afraid to bring it up, but under tents, we're allowing umbrellas. And now they make really big umbrellas that look like pop-up tents. Do you really want them allowed? Has anyone even considered that? That an
No,
umbrella
I don't
can be
think
as
we-
large as a pop-up tent?
I don't think we've considered that at all.
It's in as allowed. Or with the exception of.
Well, so tents are prohibited use. So we've defined what a tent is that is prohibited in New Shoreham. If
Yes,
you
I
wanted to
Do the same with
prohibit,
umbrellas?
if you
Tents
wanted
do
to
not, it
prohibit-
says tents do not include awnings, umbrellas, or canopies, and I would suggest taking umbrellas out.
Or
and-
umbrellas over a certain size.
I think I'd like to say umbrellas over a certain size, simply because a small umbrella for some shade for somebody, products outside of their store on a Saturday might be very appropriate, but a huge tent type umbrella would not be appropriate.
But yet, when I think of the Three Sisters, what would you, when they had those sails hanging over and ropes were attached to,
Those are awnings.
those were awnings?
Yeah,
They're
they're
okay,
allowed.
all right, that's an awning.
Yeah, I believe
Okay.
that's
Yeah.
defined as an all.
And we certainly don't want to prohibit a large umbrella on someone's deck. I think
No.
this is mainly for businesses in town that where people found the pop-up tents were blocking the structures themselves.
Maybe we need to look at the sizes of the umbrellas before we make a decision, because to tell you the truth, I really don't know what a very large umbrella looks like, and I think we need to have a little more information.
And also, I
Does everybody else feel the same way?
Yeah, I just want to add to that, Margie, I agree with you. People have complained in the past the size of flags on a flagpole. And is there some way of saying?
That's a
flag-
touchy subject. I'm not sure we want to get into that.
It's a size that relates respectively to the building. Like you couldn't have such an enormous flag that it's.
I know
out
what
of
you're saying,
scale of
but
the
you know,
building.
that is tricky to regulate.
It's tricky, but other towns have done it.
Okay.
So,
Mhm.
and
And
I've
that-
just heard complaints about it, about the size of like an enormous flag. So I'm just bringing it up. Everyone could disagree or move on. It's, you know, I'll still sleep at night, but just
And you want
saying.
them for private use, but not in downtown.
Mhm.
Oh.
Let me see the picture.
And just to clarify, it is my understanding that we're just talking about tents for commercial use.
Yeah,
Right.
That's
correct. Yeah.
correct, Michelle?
We're not talking,
And that's how this would apply
Yeah,
too. I don't
okay.
want people not to be able to have an umbrella on their deck
Exactly.
yeah, because
And-
they're gonna,
at their private home.
private home, and it's not blocking anybody's view of anything. So maybe we put
So
in
the
here
Town
something.
council did it, they kind of tabled your amendment on tents. So I just hope it doesn't, this,
This year.
Okay.
Yeah, right now, the only thing in 111 that mentions tents specifically is tents for human habitation, so that's how this definition would be used. Because in New Shoreham, it's prohibited to have tents for human habitation. The question is what is a tent for human habitation? What's a tent? There is an ordinance that you had approved in regard to the storage and trailers, temporary or mobile facilities in which a tent had been considered a temporary facility used for storage but in a commercial use. That's under 23. So that's sort of a separate issue. And again, the specific inclusion of tents is still in number 23 is still an open issue. Whether or not they're going to reference tents there and include them specifically. So as of right now, for the prohibitions, the only one that mentions tents is number 2, which is tents for human habitation.
Okay.
Mhm.
You don't sleep under an umbrella.
No, you don't. Or at least you should. You should, maybe during the daytime on the beach.
Use a nap right now.
Okay.
All right, I was just referring to that one section, but that's a good point I don't want to conflict with what has already been presented to the council. I missed the meeting when this was created. So just caught it.
Okay. So we'll leave tents alone. Okay.
And I just had, sorry, Margie, just
I-
one more.
That's what we're here for. Don't,
It's-
sorry.
Sorry,
Better be
Michelle.
scheduled now than later.
Under general prohibitions on page 1, I'm stuck trying to imagine how someone that might have number 23, the parking or use of trailers, shipping containers, or similar temporary and or mobile facilities for any commercial or industrial activity or storage, except by a contractor in association with a permitted construction job site. The following uses of trailers shall be exempt from this prohibition: transportation of machinery, equipment, boats, or other materials. I was just a little stuck on what if someone doesn't have a permitted construction job site, but they need to store their equipment in a trailer.
This would
I mean,
prohibit
Prohibit that.
commercial
for
activity.
commercial, right? Are you talking, Mary, are you like a private homeowner or commercial?
I guess it would be commercial.
Well, a contractor could store their equipment in their,
At their private home.
correct. they could not rent your yard to do it.
To do
because
it.
They have, yeah.
They
it has
could
to be-
not rent a space in a parking lot to do it.
But what if, what if they have a construction job on somebody else's lot and doesn't it make sense that to allow them to leave certain tools and equipment?
Yes, they're allowed to do
They're
that.
allowed to do that.
Do
That's
that by
okay.
definition. It's a permitted.
That's a permitted,
construction
that's
job
a
site.
permitted job
Oh.
site.
I mean, there are situations, like if you were to put in a patio, you may not need a building permit for a patio, but we would
Mhm.
allow someone to bring their equipment,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
the same
Okay,
concept. So,
Mhm.
okay.
What if someone's storing it somewhere because they're a commercial business, but they have no space to store it on their own private, or if they're building, they're a contractor and they're building someone, that family doesn't have space to store it. I'm just thinking of people who store their equipment off their own property so that they can remain in business. Well, wouldn't
I
want-
guess I mean, it's like,
How,
are you talking about, can you be more specific?
yeah,
No.
I'm trying to think.
Well, they're.
Like if they're
you
renting a
mind if I repeat
parking
your question?
space, I mean, there's people that they park at the airport.
Yeah.
They're allowed to do that.
But for instance, Block Island Recycling Management, they allow you to rent storage boxes. And they're often, it's just temporary, but
Mm,
you put the storage box on your property while you're renovating or while you're,
mm,
you're working on a project and you have to store all your goods in that storage box. You pay BI Recycling Management a fee per month. And you're supposed to then be done, but sometimes that storage ends up lasting longer than you would
Right.
anticipate.
Right.
Um,
And the building.
So
permit
instead of
is
having all your
expired.
junk in your yard, you might put it all in one of these storage containers. If this is going to be prohibited,
It depends on the nature of the use. Again, if it's a commercial use, like if you have a home business
yeah,
and
this
you're
isn't, this
trying
is
to-
just for, as I indicated, storage for temporary project purposes.
That I
for
think would
temporary
be okay.
project use, that would be residential use and that's not prohibited under this.
Okay.
But if it's a commercial, we would want that prohibited because it could go on for years.
Right.
And that's not fair to the neighbors.
Right, I think you have to have an open building permit and, I mean, you'd be reasonable about the time.
About the
Um,
time.
But it is, it's my understanding it was pretty specific.
It is.
You
yeah.
can't just stack them up all over your yard.
Right,
No,
right,
forever,
right,
yeah.
Would definitely not be fair to the neighbors.
definitely not.
Okay.
And which leads me just quickly, the big green tents that people use to store stuff, like lawnmowers and whatnot, because they don't have a garage, are those
Mhm.
also prohibited? They're like,
No.
It's not a
almost like an
business.
army tent. They're, they're not, they don't cost the same as building a building. You might not have the land to build the building. Some people put them in and use them temporary or until they get shredded because they only last so long,
Or just store equipment. in.
but store equipment in where they otherwise can't put a building up.
It's not commercial.
Yeah.
No, it's
It's
for
not
it's
currently
residential.
prohibited under 111.
It would be prohibited under,
It would not be prohibited for a residential use to like store like your yard supplies or something like that
Okay.
under a tent. That would not be prohibited. The only thing
Okay.
that's prohibited is commercial or industrial storage under such containers.
okay, thank you. I appreciate that clarification.
Okay. Any other comments, questions? Okay, then you will put this together, you and Michelle, for us for one more reviewing next month.
Yes,
should
for
go
the
through very
July,
quickly.
the July meeting.
July meeting, exactly. And we will take a quick look at it and make sure that the changes have been made and then we can approve it. Send it on July.
It is important.
It's important we get it right because
That's funny. Okay.
all right, okay.
All right, anything?
All right, number 4, zoning ordinance amendment, accessory dwelling units. Zoning ordinance section 513, review draft amendments and make recommendations to the town council, including a finding of consistency with the comprehensive plan. All righty. First of all, Michelle, if you run through with us, the changes that have been made from May and then review with us And I guess my other question for you is, have there been anything from the state legislature that they've changed in the last month?
There has not been anything new or changed, and I don't believe there's anything significant in the offing for ADUs that would alter any of these proposed changes.
Okay,
So in order to just keep it easy to read, I tried to highlight any of the changes from the version that you reviewed in May to this version. So if you look on page 5.
Sorry, real quick, this is 6/4/25. That's the version
Yes.
we're looking at? Okay.
Yep.
okay.
So if you look at the bottom of page 5, there's a highlighted portion there. And at the last meeting, there was a concern that the statutory language of the proposed dwelling units, which is up there as B, could be too limiting for where an ADU could be located. So in order to maintain the statutory language, which is needed because we need to be able to at least refer to that a subset of ADUs which are permissible by a administrative building permit only. Those are the ADUs that are definitely permitted no matter what. You only need a building permit, so those definitely have to be in. I added another subset about an additional locations for ADUs on residential lots. If it otherwise meets the standards of ADUs in this ordinance. So if, for example, you have a substandard lot that less than 20,000 square feet, but it's a residential lot, you could still all have an ADU, and this just clarifies that. So that would address that concern. On page 7, okay.
I had a quick question about the 20,000 square foot, just to clarify. I thought didn't we discuss that last month, that we wouldn't set the 20,000 as a limit because there are lots that are, say, 15,000 square feet that might be able to fit an ADU because the house on the lot is small?
Yeah, that's
Or am I-
that's why we added section C, so it's not limited to those lots. However,
Any residential lots?
on such lots, you can require more than a building permit process for review.
So under B
No, I'm just under,
2, number 3, on a lot with a total area of 20,000 square feet or less or more, for which the primary use is residential, is not,
go read down to number C right below it. That's what she's changed.
and I understand that, but so this won't conflict with that under location?
It doesn't conflict because it says
Okay.
may. So it's setting certain parameters of where these ADUs may be located. And there's different subsets of those location parameters and different considerations. And the different parts of the ADU sort of intertwine to refer to all of them, but it definitely would not contradict and would not preclude ADUs on any smaller lots or any like any substandard lots.
Okay.
Right now, as
Perfect.
drafted, it would only allow it on a residential lot, so it would be up to your consideration if you would like to allow it in commercial districts on.
Yeah.
And
My only concern about that, Michelle, was that's not doesn't meet the definition of an ADU because it's if you look at the state definition of ADU. So if you're okay with that, then great. But I thought maybe that we would have to come up with a different term for an ADU on a commercial lot.
Oh, we talked about this.
well, it says it's a residential living unit on the same lot where the principal use is a legally established single family dwelling unit or multifamily dwelling unit.
Right.
So that doesn't necessarily specifically say it has to be in a residential area. It just says that the primary use is
Yeah, so
single
we were
family
thinking
or
like if you have
multifamily.
if you have a cafe and the shopkeeper lives upstairs, that kind of situation.
Or because we have a mixed use zone that's commercial, some of the lots in that zone might be primarily
Yeah, that second thing I think we're covered.
Yeah.
But our
All right,
concern is
sure,
like the
I don't
shopkeeper.
know about I think we should look at that again, before you vote on that. Just to make sure, say someone has an inn, the zoning board has approved a 513 for an additional housing or a restaurant that also has an ADU. We just want to make sure we're not, prohibiting that.
Prohibiting that. Yes, because oftentimes that's offered to the manager or the owner.
So unfortunately, though, we are constrained to what the statutory definition is, as Peter pointed out. And the
Okay.
statutory definition, which we've replicated up on page 1 of this, it limits ADUs to the lot where the principal use is a legally established single-family dwelling unit or multifamily dwelling unit. So that would preclude ADUs where the principal use is, for example, an inn. But that is why we've retained other things like the secondary dwelling units and
Secondary dwelling unit would be a completely different,
That wouldn't be in the commercial zone.
The term that we used in East Providence was a caretaker's unit for the commercial properties.
okay, so maybe we need to look at that again, just to
Mhm.
make sure that we're
Not prohibiting.
not
ADUs in
prohibiting
commercial
ADUs
zone.
in all of the commercial.
Peter, I remember you bringing this up last meeting, so how,
Yeah,
what's
well,
your best step
so
forward to recommend changing
I-
this?
I mean, this is already state law, right? So
Yeah,
we're tweaking ordinances to be clear about what state law is, but I think if we don't come up on the new process, we're not getting rid of commercial ADUs. I think those have already been gotten rid of. So there may be a desire to reintroduce commercial, or one accessory residential unit on a commercial lot, and if so, that's certainly something we can work on, and maybe we do it as part of this ordinance. But the state made that issue, a year ago.
right. So it can't be an ADU. We can't call it an ADU. We can call it something else. We could try and fit it under something else that's already in the ordinance, or we can create something new. I know last meeting you discussed possibly drafting something to address the idea of employee housing. And that again would be in commercial areas. So that can go sort of hand in hand together to address these types of unit in commercial areas. The only question here would be, again, the ADU would be limited to the same lots where it has a principal use of a single family or multifamily dwelling unit. But do you want to extend that into areas where that principal use might be like a non-conforming use, not a residential area? Like, because you do again have those mixed use areas. So those are all just policy considerations for you. How far do you want to extend the ADU, knowing that it still needs to remain in the parameters of what the state statute definition is, which is on the top of page 1.
But we're allowed to make it less restrictive, less restrictive, right? We're like, the state has the minimum. We could add a second sentence to the definition, or no, we're not allowed to
No.
do that. So it could be a separate definition, okay.
Yeah, it would have to be something
Couldn't-
totally different because the
couldn't-
state has to have what an
could we-
ADU is.
could we add, just a question, could we add to the accessory dwelling unit that where the principal use is a legally established single-family dwelling unit or multifamily dwelling unit or commercial establishment?
No,
No.
because that's contrary to state
That's what you
statute.
can't do.
Because
Okay.
the state says no.
Oh, the state says no to that.
Yes. The state has defined it only on lots where the principal use is single family or multifamily dwellings.
Okay.
That's the only place
So-
where you have ADU.
Okay.
So since ADUs are primarily rented out, couldn't we call the commercial lots ADUs apartments?
Then that would go into multifamily.
Yeah, we'd have to come up with another section to address the commercial zones. Because now if this were to pass, you would have an ADU, if you have a commercial property, say you're an Old Harper commercial and you have an ADU on your property, it's now,
Not allowed.
it's now prior existing non-conforming because the
Oh,
ordinance
yeah.
wouldn't allow,
Hmm.
so that,
Well, I don't even think it's an ADU. I think it's a dwelling unit at that point.
Well, I don't think it,
No,
no.
it's still an
It's
accessory.
still an accessory dwelling unit, the use remains as is. It doesn't revert to a full dwelling unit without restrictions.
Yeah, because you can't actually just add a dwelling
Right.
without the.
No,
amount
no,
of
right,
acreage,
the restrictions would stay. Yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
I mean, it would come, it'd get the rights of a non-conforming use.
yes.
And unfortunately, because state statute supersedes, whether we make these changes or not, it's, you can't have an accessory dwelling unit on a commercial property as of now, state statute, regardless of what this ordinance says. So the goal here is to bring this ordinance into compliance with state statute.
Right, and then we can work on another section and call it something else.
Right, and then, and we can explore, I think you'd probably be better off sort of saving that issue to consider separately from this ADU
Yes.
ordinance, because
Mhm.
again, there's gonna be a lot of considerations there about
Yeah.
the scope of the commercial dwelling unit that you wanna use, what you're gonna call it, if there's gonna be different standards for employee housing, all those different considerations.
So we can add a
Okay.
provision in our commercial districts for ADUs, or we'd still have to call them something else.
You'd still have to call them something else.
Okay. But didn't
I'll
you
look-
say it was
I'll
more
look into it.
restrictive in the state and
Oh,
not?
I'll look into like some other, see how other towns are addressing that and see if I can put something together based on the current language
Mhm.
and what has been approved already for,
You could call it an accessory commercial dwelling unit. It's just accessory dwelling unit itself is a term of art that's been defined by statute, and since statute supersedes, we don't have the flexibility to try and adapt it to other uses.
Call it a
Okay.
commercial
Okay.
access.
yeah, I'll work on something, just
Okay.
pulling together some language from zoning decisions and what we currently have.
Okay.
Okay.
I think,
But that's separate that.
as they were saying, this issue of employee housing keeps coming up in front of us. So if there is a way, I do think those are trying to address the same issue. So maybe we want to work on those together.
Yeah, put
So
the
that
kitchen.
we're solving we're trying to solve a broader problem as opposed to, oh, we did all that and now actually we're trying to fit something back in and that kind of thing. That makes
Mhm.
sense to other people.
Yeah, you would.
Right. Well.
If you have an idea of when you'd like to look at that, we could set a goal to have a draft to be considered at some meeting in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. The
Um,
cooking facilities.
when.
Yeah, and I can go back and look at the notes from previous meetings when we started to
Mhm.
work on language to amend the zoning ordinance to allow, say, a dorm style
Yeah.
for employee
Cooking
housing.
facilities.
Yeah, I think that would be a different section because you would want it to be maybe a special use permit. You'd probably want to
yes.
see review where
Absolutely.
you may allow a commercial ADU by right.
Yes.
So, but I can look.
But it could be all
Yeah,
under
we
this
can have-
umbrella of housing in the commercial zone.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Good decision.
Okay. Next thing, Michelle.
Were you asking for, sorry, was she kind of asking for when, Jen, when do you think something like that is feasible to start?
I mean,
Is that
I
your
think
question?
I think we should probably wrap up some of the other amendments and move those. to
There's
the
a lot.
And then we'll
Uh,
circle back to,
Sure.
I don't want to wait too long for the commercial ADU
Yeah.
Yes.
language, but
Yeah,
then
I think that's
I'll
more,
add it on
That's
the
very important.
calendar for future agendas.
I mean,
Okay.
Jen, just communicate with us if you want us to draft something, like, give us a idea of when the planning board would like to see something on that separate issue.
Sure, absolutely.
Back to that, when an accessory dwelling unit is on a lot, that's other than that, the ones where it's directly expressly permitted by statute. So this is where you get to expand it, where we expanded it to a residential lot that otherwise meets the standards of this ordinance. We're again on page 5. One of the considerations is if it's proposed in those other locations, what sort of review process should be required for that? For example, on a substandard lot, what type of review process would this board like to see for an ADU that's proposed on a substandard lot? Should it be development plan review? Should it be, because it's, not a major change, so it could fall under that development plan review statute arguably? Should it be a standard, a special use permit? If you're building it on a substandard lot, so that's this board's determination what that review process should be.
And I can tell you right now, we have 75% of the lots are substandard, so
Exactly.
we're allowing them by right. We're allowing them with a building permit.
As long as they
Yeah.
meet standards.
So as long as they're under 1,200 square feet of living space,
Yeah.
they meet their setbacks, their lot
Yeah.
coverage.
This is
I-
detached ADUs on lots less than 20,000 square feet only.
Yep, so, okay, we'll even take those, we are, right now, we allow those by right, but you may want to see
I,
a lot, so if it's a 20,000 square foot lot in a zone that's 120,000 square feet, they're gonna get an increase in lot building coverage and a decrease in setbacks. So let's say it's a very small lot, then you could have an ADU, if it's allowed by right, without any kind of review, that's 6 feet from a property line. I'm just thinking of one that I know. So
but if it's an ADU,
if it's an ADU,
I think the easiest approach, in my opinion, without giving this too much thought, is to have it comply with all the other zoning standards and state standards. I don't know how we could, I mean, I'm open to some ideas, but I don't know how we could pick and choose what's going to be good and not. Because we don't
Well,
even know if
obviously it
that
has to comply with
20,000
state.
square foot lot is in a wooded area, if it's right next to somebody else. I mean, that'd be too hard to decide. We wouldn't want to prohibit an ADU that's not going to affect anyone just because it's on a 15,000 square foot lot.
Obviously, it has to comply with the standards. I guess the question is who reviews it to determine whether it does or does not comply with the standards. Right now, if it's an administrative building permit process, the only person who technically has to review it is the building inspector who issues the permits. It doesn't go to the zoning official at all. I mean, granted, internally, he can
Yeah.
ask for the advice, but the zoning official doesn't need to sign off on anything for a permit to be issued for an ADU in those circumstances. So
But
if you wanted
I
additional,
sign off on, I mean, I approve all of the ADUs. So I review every building permit that comes in. So I'm not sure.
right, but that's an internal
For
decision.
compliance, yeah. So it wouldn't
Is
go,
in compliance with the statute. I'm just saying that there's no requirement for your review in this statute. So if there was some other administration here, there's no requirement for the building official to have a zoning official review any ADU application for compliance before issuing a building permit. So
per the state law, correct? Because the.
only in certain circumstances per state law. This is what I'm asking about. In those circumstances, for example, on a lot that's less than 20,000 square feet, you could require additional review to ensure compliance with all of the standards, other than the building official review. And that's a question of whether or not you wanted to have that additional review sort of as a, just to be conservative, as like a checkpoint on those other circumstances.
So I think some options, I mean, because we know that the zoning official is reviewing all of the applications, and I don't think that the building official, I mean, he doesn't generally review zoning standards for the building permits. He's looking at building construction. So, I mean, if you would like to put something in the language for lots less than 20,000 square feet, you could use development plan review, you could use technical review committee, you could use a special use permit, or just review by the zoning official, just so that it's in there. That's up to you.
But does our town, I mean, it seems to me if the building official isn't the person, if the building official is only giving permits, not looking at any zoning regulations. The zoning official here does look at every building permit application to make sure that they are in compliance. Wouldn't it just fall under the same? Can't the 20,000 square, well, I don't see why we'd need a special 20,000 square foot rule if it's already on the zoning official's desk, is my thought.
Because under the statute, it's not on the zoning official's desk for certain, for that subset of automatically permitted, which has to be permitted only with the administrative building permit process. I mean, you can put it on the zoning official's desk, but if somebody is going to appeal the denial of a permit of the building official, then you can't necessarily say, well, it's because it went to the zoning official and they didn't approve it, because that's not supposed to be part of the process.
It's a step in OpenGov, Michelle, for your building permit. So
Yeah.
before you get your permit, the zoning official hits a checkbox.
Right, I'm just saying that the interaction with the zoning official isn't part of the process under the
Right.
statutory.
Yep.
So, I mean, it would be under a strict building permit review. Unlike if something comes before this board, the review of this board is different than the review of a building official, even though the zoning official looks at both of those things. If that makes more sense to you. Jen looks at all, Jen
So
looks
what
at
I'm
every,
hearing is that maybe a development plan review might be a good idea.
yeah, and I think that that's what this draft ordinance sets up as development
Because
plan review, so.
part of our, well, yes, we certainly want to promote housing and so forth. Part of our
Yeah.
job is also to protect the neighborhood. And on a
Right.
20,000 square foot lot or less, if they are impinging on their neighbors, then we might want to locate it differently or require screening or some other way of making sure that we are protecting the neighborhood.
But if,
But I
But
don't
can I
think that,
interject?
like, if you do development plan review, then you're sort of removing part of this zone, the special use permit, and that's where things are kind of getting a little bit complicated, because once something goes to planning, then it doesn't necessarily get reviewed by the zoning board.
You could
And I-
say if it
I
doesn't have a
don't-
special use permit, if it's by right, it's DPR.
I just think if the state allows ADUs, I don't know that we're gonna have a leg to stand on to review and reject an application because it's on less than 20,000 square feet if we don't have any grounds to stand on.
Yeah,
You
the
do,
state
yeah.
law is 20,000, you have to have a
Oh, the state
minimum.
laws is 20.
Yes. The
Yes,
state law is a minimum of 20,000.
yes.
We're just less restrictive.
For detached, or
Right, because there's so
Maybe new
many, that
construction.
surprises me. There's so many lots in most communities in the state of Rhode Island that are on far less than 20,000 square foot lots.
Yeah, definitely.
Right, but I think that this is an acknowledgement that on less than 20,000 square foot lots, there should be more scrutiny, I guess. They're trying to expedite the process on that certain subset, which is here as B, which is within the existing footprint of a structure or on a lot that's more than 20,000 square feet. They want it to be quick. They want there to be no considerations such as buffering or those type of conditions that you as a planning board can impose in that small subset of circumstances. In the larger thing, if you're going to put an ADU on a lot of less than 20,000 square feet, it's definitely permissible under the statute. The question is what type of review do you want? Again, like Margie said, development plan review gives you the opportunity to review some of those things, such as what it's going to do to the neighbors and the design components and whether or not you want to require buffering or those types of things, which are standard on our development plan review.
Could we just table this until next month, so I have a chance to kind of look at the ordinance and
Sure.
review it with Karen?
I think we definitely
Michelle
want to
and
put some
Peter.
restrictions
Thank you.
on it. I'm not sure what is the best method. I kind of like the development plan review personally, but I'm open to other thoughts. But I do think we need to protect the neighborhood. It isn't under 20,000 square feet. It's a very small piece of property.
So not to jump forward too much, but if you go to page 9,
Okay.
in the draft, it has a sort of subset of procedure where an amendment was made, where it basically lays out that you have that certain subset, that you have an administrative building permit process only. And then you have a subset that has sort of development plan review. And then you have the ones that are special use permit. And it's basically that you have 3 different categories of review, and that's what this is trying to lay out. So again, I'm just pointing this out to you. These are policy considerations. So this was drafted with those ideas in mind, but these can definitely be changed to reflect your preference in terms of what type of review you think is actually necessary for these.
Yeah, development review makes sense.
Yeah, we can think about that, and I think it sounds like you know what criteria you're going to approve by right, what's gonna go for a special use permit, but it's this 20,000 square feet or less. The lot's less than 20,000 square feet.
And the state cannot object because the state requires 20,000 square feet.
Oh, yeah.
We're offering something extra. So as far as the state is concerned, it's outside of their purview.
Right.
Well, I
we're
mean,
just-
it's still a little bit in their purview, but yeah, it's
yeah,
not.
I mean, you're trying to
He's
decide
smiling.
if you want review or, yeah, so that part we could talk about.
I think that can be worked out.
Yeah. Okay. You notice I'm getting slapped.
The ordinance might be reviewed by a state judge.
Uh-huh.
So to drop down to page 7, one of the issues there was someone who spoke at the last meeting in terms of the occupancy of accessory dwelling units, and that the accessory dwelling unit may not be owner occupied if the principal use dwelling is offered for tourist or transient use. Again, as we discussed last meeting, the idea is we don't want people vacating their principal structure to rent it out and then living in their ADU so that they have that principal structure to rent out. The idea of development of ADUs is to increase the housing, not to increase the availability of tourist or transient units.
And I would, oops, sorry. Go ahead.
So in the comment section over to the right of the document, I drafted some alternate language that you can consider, which all sort of tries to target that same idea, but also might address some of the concerns. So you have basically 3 alternatives there as ideas for consideration. But again, ultimately, we're looking for what the planning board feels is most appropriate to, if they want to retain that idea in the draft ordinance.
I don't have the 3 options on the right of page 7. You're in section C.
Yeah, it should be there as a comment.
I have
And-
2 comments on the right, but they're for C and E.
Yeah, the different. Maybe that was the one before this.
I don't know. I'll look on my laptop.
Just for the sake of being a pain in the neck, I would like to go on record by saying that a homeowner should be allowed to live in his or her ADU if and only if the primary residence is rented out year-long and is deed restricted as such. You are actually increasing the housing more than just using ADUs because the primary residence is, generally speaking, larger than an ADU unit, so that families can have a larger structure than the 1,200 whatever the square footprint is. And furthermore, a senior who has lost a spouse may be losing income, and to have that safety net, she or he could earn more money renting out a year-round primary residence than an ADU. So I see that as a win-win.
So to my
Right, so
knowledge,
this section would
that
not
is-
prohibit that. That language would actually be more restrictive than this section. This section only prohibits the owner from occupying the ADU if they're using their principal residence as short-term rental or
I
transit.
know. I'm
So
just
if they're
making,
using their primary residence for long-term rental, then this would not prohibit that at all.
I know. I'm just saying what I believe in.
Yeah.
I think the language you have there looks good.
Which one?
Sorry, the one that's in the document.
Okay.
That's material. Okay. Any other comments?
Those were the only comments.
Okay, then we'll leave it as is. All right. Okay, Michelle, anything else that was changed?
Down on page 8, I just highlighted the portions with the affidavit, because that was questioned whether there was consistency with the affidavit provision. So I ensured that, there was consistency, with the provision of the affidavit. One of the things that I did put in is that the affidavit would be due on June 1st of any odd year. So that would be like 2025 is an odd year, so it would be June 1st of this year. 2027 would be the next time that the affidavit would be due. That way it's due on the same date for everybody. Again, I just picked that date arbitrarily. This way administratively, we know whether or not they're all filed rather than trying to track down different deadlines for all different ADUs depending on when the first one was filed and the last one was filed. So this makes it a little bit more expedient, but if we want to change that date to something that's
Yes.
better,
would
then
change-
we have to do that.
I would like to change the date. Well, first, like adopting this puts it in that we're already starting off and that we're not in compliance. And then we're starting the whole process later and it doesn't make any sense to. So it could be, you could say even year, or you could say, I mean, we're due to review them anyway, so I would like to do that sooner than later, as soon as we have this amendment passed, but.
Yeah,
maybe
so it could be June
December,
1st.
December, or change it to even, but I just think having a date deadline, you could say odd year, even year, so that we know whoever's in this position knows, okay, this is the year that we need to send those notices out, but putting a date of like June or December just seems,
That's a good idea.
Okay.
unnecessary.
It can be any date. The idea was just to
Yeah.
get it all on the same day so that everybody had the same deadline rather than trying to track down separate deadlines and maintain records for separate
Oh,
deadlines.
yes, we do that. We do it all at the same time. Yes.
Right, but this puts that into the ordinance because right now it was within a year of the last one, so that would have, depending on when you built it, it would have different
Mhm.
deadlines theory, so.
So we could just say, by on or before, I just don't know if you really need to have a date, like a.
If you're
June.
doing it the same deadline every time, what is that deadline? And I can just incorporate that.
We have to do it every other year. So that's. the
So
deadline.
every other
So
year,
we're-
which is that those even
this
years?
year. So right now we're on 2025, so it's odd
Okay.
years.
So if we keep it at odd years, then the next time it would be due would be the next odd year. Cause won't be passed before June 1st, or we could put it at a different date.
I think, well, then we should change it to even because I don't think we should wait 2 more years to review them. I don't think that's a good.
Well, it would be
idea.
every other
So,
year, so we already did it, if you already did it this year.
We did not because we were waiting for the amendments to.
Okay. So so we can either put it in for whenever you want to do it for this year, or if you do it for this year, then we can aim it for 2 years after whenever you
Okay.
do it this year.
Yeah, I will look at that. Yep, for next month.
Okay, I'll put note for date. Okay, next.
I think that's on page 12. Again, that's with the affidavit, just making sure that if there's more than one accessory dwelling unit because it's been created by special use permit, that they each get their own affidavit. Yeah, the rest of those changes We're just to make sure that it's consistent where the affidavit's required and is basically required across the board. That's pretty much the changes from last month.
Okay, any questions on this one or any comments? No.
I still have a question about 48 on page 1, density residential, not included in the calculation of a residential density in a larger development proposal. I just don't like larger development proposals still.
Where are you?
That's straight
Page one.
statutory language, unfortunately.
That's state language, you can't change it?
Yes, it is.
Okay, okay.
That takes care of that problem. Okay, any other comments, questions?
Oh, I see you. Okay.
See where you are? Okay, any problems? All right, then we'll mark this for the corrections, and Jen will do a little bit of research, and we will work on this again in July. Okay. Jen, you have any comments, questions?
Nope,
Okay,
that sounds good.
all
For
right.
outdoor lighting, I mean, I know I missed the last meeting, but I don't have anything new. But I put this on the agenda because it was unclear. It looked like you didn't vote. The minutes reflected that you did not
Yeah,
vote last
so
month, so.
we asked the board members to review it and we would discuss it
Okay, so I don't know if you
tonight.
would like to table this until next month? And I
Um,
can recirculate the document that you.
Yeah, there were some
prepared.
questions, there was some changes that were to be made, and one of the things we wanted to check on was the night lighting for the flags. Or what I have from my notes.
Right.
So do you want to just table this, and then July, we will have, by that time, we will have something that shows the corrections. And we want to talk a little bit about the night lighting for the, for flags. I'd like to know what other towns do, because there are a number of places here that leave flags up 24 hours a day. They need to be lit. We might want to limit the amount of luminaries that can be used,
Yeah.
so it isn't too bright.
Right.
So I'd like you to do a little work on that and come back with a proposal to us,
Okay.
because we do need to, since we know the flags are going to be up, we do need to have them lit. And there were some other, I don't have the other things in the note, but there were some other things that we needed to look at for the final.
So are there folks that leave their flags up all winter? Or is it
Yeah.
We do.
There are a few people, most of them have it up, what I would call summer, May to October.
But there are people who keep them up all year long, yeah.
no, I mean like when they're not at the property.
Yeah,
I
Okay.
don't know.
we do. My husband
You
does.
know, okay.
Sorry, I mean like are there summer people that leave them up all winter?
Okay, most everybody takes theirs down because they're worried about storms coming through and being
No, he's
an
got a
issue.
flag he's got a flag that'll fly all year long and not get shredded.
It's all shredded.
yet.
I meant like summer.
So
I meant like summer people, like folks that aren't on the island. That's kind of the loophole that we're dealing with in the ordinance is if you go off island and you leave your flag up, could be a violation right now.
But if you're Jeff.
I would tell my husband that at dinner tonight.
Tell him after dinner.
Okay.
Also had a
Not under the
question.
current ordinance, but under the proposed one.
Until I introduce you to him anyway, Peter, you have to meet him first.
In a well-lit building. I just have a quick question, Margie, maybe.
Yes, go ahead.
Someone had mentioned-
Anything on lighting that we
Yes.
want him to take a look at. Now is the time to say so.
Yes, please, thanks. And this may be my ignorance in the lighting ordinance as it stands, but somebody made a comment about the visual lighting from commercial building that's on year round and very bright. Again, I don't recall where that was in this. If there are restrictions and on not just bright lighting, but the allowable time frame in which you can have a commercial building lit up if you're not there all winter.
I believe that's in there, yes.
There
But we
is.
can look at it and follow up.
Somebody approached me today or yesterday and said that the lighting at Champlin's is so bright that it affects the houses around the pond. And I don't know if they break the rules or not.
Well, that's probably gonna be one of the issues, because even when this ordinance comes into effect, it's for the replacement of lighting and what have you, right? We can't make them change everything that they currently use. They just have to comply when they change their lighting out.
Or
Am I
within 5
understanding
years.
that?
Or within 5 years. Or when you.
Yeah, we were declaring it a nuisance.
Okay.
Oh, if it's declared a nuisance, they have to change it? Is it also a nuisance to keep them on through the winter at Champlin's, for example?
That not in the current version of the ordinance,
Okay,
of the proposed ordinance.
thank you.
This
I
has
mean-
time switch controls and all sorts of.
And I
And
think
you
we
s-
want a recommendation on what, how bright lights, or perhaps a limit on the amount of luminaries that you can have, so that we may have lights, so for safety issues and so forth, but it isn't one of these lights that is so bright that it practically blinds the entire area for a quarter of a mile around. So that was one of the things I think we wanted to look at, as to
Okay,
how bright is bright, and then we limit.
okay.
So.
So- Under
Go ahead.
111, you have a general nuisance prohibition. So if something's found sufficiently injurious, obnoxious, offensive, dangerous, and is a nuisance, it is in violation of the zoning ordinance. The goal here with the lighting ordinance is to define what is prohibited more specifically. Right now, you sort of have that flexibility. So if there's a real issue at Champlin's, such that it's actually obnoxious or offensive to the community at large, you can enforce under the current zoning ordinance that you have under section 111. This would just give you a different tool for enforcement of those issues that's a little less fact intensive, burden intensive, if it would ever get challenged.
Mhm.
Okay,
But I would think that the state would challenge the word offensive, being that it's so subjective. We would need a definition or nuisance. It's not a concrete term.
that's why we want to go with eliminating the amount of brightness.
Yeah. You can
That's a
control.
fact.
Yeah.
And you can prove it either yes, it is, or no, it isn't. But I don't know what that magic number is. That's why we need to do a little more research.
Okay,
Okay?
thank you.
Other comments, other questions, or anything else we want them to look at it for lighting recommendations for next month?
No, but I'm glad we're going over that again.
Yeah, it's got a lot of good ideas in it, but it's not complete yet. Okay. All right, then we will put that down for July. That's great. And last but not least, we have 10 minutes from April and May. If you will. We just got them today, so if you have does anybody need a chance to take a quick look at them?
You just got
I missed them.
You just got them.
I've read them. I did not catch anything, but I read them very quickly, so
Same
I'm happy
here.
to hold for a minute or two and let people read through.
On April, Gail is absent twice.
Amazing.
Okay. Yep, yep, she surely was.
And Chris is listed as absent and there.
They were just sent today?
No,
They're on the table.
they're printed.
She
They're
put 'em
right in
on-
front of
she
you,
put 'em on the
actually.
table.
Peter and Michelle, thank you very much for all of your help today. I really appreciate it. And if you would like to log out, we do not need you for the minutes, and you are welcome to grab your car and go home.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you again for all your help. We definitely needed
Have a good
you on
weekend.
some of these ordinances.
Thank
Definitely
you.
need you. And we'll again next month.
Thank you.
Good. Enjoy.
You don't say.
I don't know if I save it and then I have to recycle it and think.
What I try to do is mark them so I don't get mixed up which
Yeah.
version we're on.
I should do more of that because,
Yeah,
yeah.
you know, the May's version, the June version, the July's version. After a while, I don't know which one is which.
I should start doing that.
Mhm.
Yeah, I couldn't find anything and I'm looking again, but I'm burned out.
I could just say one suggestion, Jen, she can, Amanda can reduce my name to Gail Hall. I use Hall as my last name. That's not a big deal to me either way, but. Mhm. We should- Oh, you do? Oh, okay. It is part of my name. It's not my last name.
So I don't need to.
I guess because it's Ballard Hall, I've always thought Ballard Hall is like all one word.
Yeah. Mhm.
So we'll go to use just Hall from now on.
And again, I'm not offended by it, so.
Yeah. Yeah, I learned a long ago not to get upset when people misspell my name.
No.
This is, it's not a problem. Okay.
Yeah.
This, then,
Which set of minutes, Claire? April?
just the end of it. Motion to approve the minutes, and I think I. Another meeting. Actually, I don't think I've passed it, I need them. Yeah, it's weird, the people who voted before here is all a little bit, alright, I don't think that, yeah. I think I was.
Twice.
Oh, I see. Page one, typo. Under April, it says present where Claire, take off that Claire. It was. And then it says Margaret Sosha. Chris, got you. Okay. Make sure that it matches. Okay. Okay, I'll make a motion that the minutes for April 9th be approved as corrected.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, motion carries. Now I'll make a motion for the minutes to be approved for May 14th. Do I have a second?
Second.
Do I, any questions or comments? Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, motion carries. And I make a motion that the meeting be adjourned. Everybody vote yes?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, guys. Appreciate the work we did today. It's good. These definitions are tough, but
It's important.
it's important that we get it right, but it's,
Tedious.
that's a wonderful word.
Tedious.
And I'm
Okay,
being.
everybody
polite.
turn off their lights, their